I'd like to see, instead of having what we're going to have with the teachers' union suit doing battle with the state, which is the article in the back there. Obviously, the legislature couldn't be up in arms and passing these things if there weren't a lot of people who had a lot of feeling that what's going on in the schools is not satisfactory. I didn't give you a copy of my note. And to me, that our superintendent, has said he's in favor of excellence. And I don't think excellence is easy to arrive at. You pay a price for it. And so my attempt here was to point out that our society is not going to pay for stuff if they don't feel you're producing. And they're going to say, fire teachers, fire administrators, fire whoever, because they don't teach science, they don't teach math, they don't teach this, that, and the other. So in what I've been, in my little letter here, I gave you the references that even Mozart or Carl Friedrich Gauss or some of the people who are known to be geniuses and world-level whatevers.
And Dr. Orlando.
And well, of course, Dr. O, obviously. That none of these people became instantly world level. They weren't born, they were made. Mozart's father was one hell of a musician and a good music's teacher. And I gather his violin book still circulates in teaching violin. I don't know, I don't play an instrument. But it takes 10 years, is the general assertion, for somebody to be world class. So if we want our students, when they graduate from here, to be world class, we got to start and give them 10 years of serious, it's called here, deliberate practice. The practice is aimed at the kid, at the level the kid is at, and has these properties. You get feedback, you get opportunities for repetition, you get correction of errors, and so forth.
I grabbed this one right here. Are these yours?
Yeah, those are mine.
All right, thank you.
Well, that's what I'm handing out. To me, I think Newburyport's a wonderful place, and I think they have a great school. But if it wants to be excellent and world class, then it's got to start in the first and second grade to produce kids who are good at mathematics. I've just finished, having screamed about math teaching, my arithmetic book, which is not a graded book, not for first grade or second grade, it's for kids. And I've found in the past 8 years that I can teach sixth graders calculus if I give them the arithmetic they need, the pre-calculus, polynomial stuff, but you got to start early and build them up to it. So that if you want to teach science and mathematics becomes part of your science course, that it wouldn't be, seems a little strange to me, but anyway, then you've got to do a lot to get those kids so they can do stuff. That Massachusetts is out to do something about the unions not producing is not me. That's not my comment. And that other people don't think that Romney was a self-made man is also not me. I'm not a self-made anything. My parents would die to get me into Groton and Harvard, and they did. I don't think I did. I don't know how I got there, but there it is. There are people who encourage you, and I would like to see Newburyport students, when they graduate, to have every college want to have you come to our school. And if you don't have the finances, we want to pay to make sure you come to our school. And I don't think a huge fight with the unions or what have you, none of that's going to help. What we have to do is decide that innovation is possible and see what can be done. And I know that mathematics can be taught better than what is happening now in Salisbury, and Amesbury, or here, because I get parents and kids that I work with or talk with all the time. Thank you for being patient and listening.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I want to show you something. That when Race to the Top money was offered to us, Mr. Cole will remember that I was not in favor of taking the money, because taking that money meant we were obligated to coming up with a teacher evaluation system that I thought was going to end up looking a lot like the one that's on that ballot initiative. This, about half of this represents the new teacher evaluation system, regulations, guidelines, and rubrics. And I'm finding myself these days saying, I didn't want us to take the money. It wasn't enough money. I didn't trust the state, frankly, to come up with an evaluation system that I thought was really going to be an educative process that you learn as you're evaluating it. It was a cycle.
Yeah.
They put together a committee. How big was the committee? It was like 40 or 50 people, made up of union representatives, parents, teachers, and they created a system that I think may actually be very, very effective at really giving teachers the feedback, giving parents the feedback, engaging, and it's very coherent. And I'm shocked that it's so coherent. I'm shocked that it's so coherent. And we're working closely with the Newburyport Teachers Association. We're jointly training to begin to go in and reopen the contract to negotiate around the things we need to negotiate. How do we do with the evaluation? But we're doing it together. We're not doing it in an adversarial way. So we're going to be doing it collaboratively. This is really, this stuff is now on the state website. You can take a look at what some of these rubrics are. There is, teachers are going to be evaluated on their practice, and they're going to be evaluated on student growth. So both are going to become measures over the next several years. You need to get several years worth of measures. Steve, you're talking about the statistical rigor. But it isn't just the MCAS. It has to, a piece of the evaluation has to do with your local, what you develop locally to assess kids. And I have to say, I've been through 3 trainings with the state. We're beginning to look at this with the union, and we're going to be talking tonight. You'll get a flavor of it because we're talking tonight about the superintendent's evaluation. That the superintendent's evaluation, our evaluation of the superintendent, looks a lot like the superintendent's evaluation of principals, which looks a lot like principals and administrators, which looks a lot like principals and administrators' evaluation of teachers. There's a coherence to it that I did not anticipate. This is it, and there's still some sections we're waiting to get from the state on superintendent's evaluation, administrators, principals, and teachers. And what that ballot initiative is a group of people who don't think that this system is punitive enough. And they are interested in putting a ballot initiative on the ballot that is going to be a system that is, pegged in a much less sophisticated way, and I think a much less useful way. And that's why the teachers union is and if we could join that lawsuit, I'd join that lawsuit at this point, having seen what the state has produced by working in partnership with the teachers union, working in partnership. So we'll be talking a little bit about it tonight. You get a flavor of what the expectations are. But if you go to DESE's website, you can take a look at some of these new rubrics, and they're really very thoughtfully done.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't think they could do it, so I was against them taking the money. So you live and you learn.
I hear constantly, I wish my kids were coming to the Boys and Girls Club and studying math with you. I'm one person, I'm 77 years old, and not about to take up full-time.
I don't know if there's an opening here.
Yeah, I'm not a candidate.
Just as a segue, I think, and in fact, we broached the subject the first time you went through as you were awaiting the rubrics on January 10th. and I had made public comment, and I guess one of the operative words, of course, when you saw the original matrix and the session was professional. And I think we're all looking towards that sense that, teaching is a profession. And so that instilling in the students that, we're doing it, we're learning, even if with all these encumbrances in terms of $25,000, we'll find a way. And so I think, as the contract, whatever is open and a lot of that is not, I think a lot of teachers do feel that way. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's sort of disillusioning when everything comes down to sort of more like a sort of punch clock type of thing. Can we, as this isn't part of the contract, so can we have a stipend for this? But I mean, when we get to that level, and we're not there yet as a community, as a nation, where teachers are compensated for it, and then where that operative word professional is
I would just like to comment. I've looked at it mainly for the superintendent, because that was our assignment. And what I like is the self-assessment piece. There's a huge component of self-assessment teachers, administrators, and the superintendent. Personal goal establishing. And so I see that as a big component of this, which I think would probably trigger quite a buy-in, because I mean, we all want to better ourselves and achieve more for ourselves and in turn for those we serve. That's the flavor I've gotten from this, and like Bruce, I'm pretty excited about what I've seen. It is a tremendous amount of work.
If I could just make one more point, and I don't know if Sean noticed this, if he's had a chance to look at them. They don't talk about the evaluation process. They talk about the evaluation cycle, that it is an ongoing process, that once you think you finished it, you're really at the beginning of the next process, the next cycle. And that completely, that's a very skillful use of language as far as I'm concerned as a writer, and it is a very powerful idea. It really reframes the conversation about practice.
in progress.
And I think the other thing, Bruce, you alluded to it a minute ago, is that everybody's responsible for everyone else in this. That everybody's on a cycle. Everybody's doing self-assessment, setting goals, having meetings, collecting data. So it's almost like building blocks. If one of those blocks falls, there are other places or people to pick that up. So we're dealing tonight with the superintendent's evaluation, but our determinations for him, we will glean from principals, from students, from parents, as will all the other people being evaluated with this. So everybody in the state of Massachusetts that has a license will be using this same tool to be evaluated. So I think that in its very extent raises the level of excellence once we get rolling in the process. It's going to take some time, but we're mandated to start in September with some pieces of it. So that's where we are and what we're going to start working on.
Could you expound upon, and perhaps we could relate this to some of what Angela was speaking of at the last school committee meeting about what was happening with science, the evaluation with the evolution in progress of programming, because it sounded like there was a sort of some nexus or some synergy between the two when she was talking about working with the teachers and that component of everyone self-assessing and so instead of like having it be, it sounds like you have great hope in terms of that constant reevaluation of yourself as a teacher, just that whole, because
well, let me take one example that we've talked about before, I think, and in goal setting, a department may determine that they want to set some goals together. So I'm thinking about the science department, and common assessment was one of the things that they've been working on. And so that was a collaborative effort by all of those teachers working together. So that could have been part of an evaluation goal for them. I'm thinking of if a fourth grade teacher wanted to do an end of a chapter assessment, and we wanted to know how all of our kids are doing, it might be a common one rather than each individual teacher does their own. So just by the effort it's going to take to collect data, we have to be careful about what data we are indeed collecting, and that it is something that we're looking at across a board. Nick?
I think one of the things that makes this process interesting, I think we need to get back with, tie back to some of the discussions that we've been having with Dr. Orlando, you said, is the whole area of what they're calling the rubrics. Rubrics for those people who are not fluent in edubabble. It's nothing more than the context. What does it look like? What does the end result look like? So if you have an excellent superintendent in communication with the community, what does that mean? And some examples. And so part of what we get the flexibility to do is, if we choose to go in and alter those rubrics to meet our community needs. And so when we begin to talk about defining excellence and looking for excellence in our schools, this is one of the areas in which I believe we can have the biggest impact, is going back and tweaking those rubrics. The rubrics are pretty well written as they stand, at least the ones that, the examples that they've sent out. But they probably, yes, we need some tweaking. And I think that's where the more people who are interested in this process, take a look at them, want to spend some time reading through some of them, giving us some feedback. I think that would be one area which would be very valuable to us in terms of getting the community to buy in to how it is that we're conducting these cycles of continuous improvement. Because that's really what it's all about. It's a cycle of continuous improvement. And, we cannot operate as a school system in a vacuum. We are part of this community and really need that community buy-in to the way in which we're saying, hey, these are the standards that we're holding our teachers accountable to.
And our principals and our superintendent. And,
I learn something every day, and I'm a simpleton. A couple of things today I think that need to be brought to school committee's attention is one of the things is what Mr. Warren kind of said, but it dovetails into, I sit in the back of the room for a reason, so I don't hear too well, but I think Ms. Bick quoted a guy named Mr. Al November.
Alan November.
November, right? And I think she was talking about excellent schools. Am I right? And the statement was, those schools that are excellent, the student is the learning.
Who owns the learning?
Well, who owns the...
That's what he said. He asked who
Right.
owns the...
Well, see, that's what I believe. The student owns it. Okay? That's a very critical piece here. I think we lose sight of it all the time, and you can slap me over the head because a lot of people do that every now and then. It really isn't about the teachers. And it really isn't about the superintendent or the principals. Yeah, they have a responsibility, but I think, again, I have to keep it simple. What I know about, whatever you said, educational bablia, is what I've read and what I've seen here. We cannot continue to educate the kids like we educate them now. It's a new era. Whether it's 21st century learning skills, which are different than a teacher standing in the front of the room, we have to get to what he's talking about. We have an obligation over the 10 years that or so we have these students to change the way they learn and to make sure they learn things above and beyond the MCAS. Because there are, whatever you want to call them, rubrics. If you think the math here is not very good, well, you bring it here to our attention and have us look at it. Yeah, I think I showed that science is an outlier in this school district. Show them the facts, because then we have an obligation to go back and retool. Practice. Well, if you want to be a good musician like Mozart, you probably had to practice an awful lot. So we have to reach out to all the kids in a unique, individual way that makes them practice and not say, you've heard it, I have a class that's not as good as the other class. Well, that's all right. Bring them up to speed. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about some different things, and this is the dialogue forum. I'd like to see it over there, not over here, because this is the sound of one hand clapping. Longer school days, we've heard that. Longer school years. We can't control how the state educates everybody. We can't control how the nation educates everybody, but we can control how our community educates people. And that's what I want to be seen and heard in this forum. And that's what I would like school committee members to tell me. This is not the material for discussion at school committee. This is not what we're supposed to do, because I think otherwise. And so that's one thing I learned today. The other thing I learned today, you all should hit upon. Mr. Herzog made a statement today, didn't he?
After money.
Very interesting. So here's the deal. Yeah, the city got 150K more this year because appropriations were felt to be higher. The school budget represents 50% of the city budget, and $25,000 is 16% if I do my math correctly, but I use my calculator. Get a little old. What am I saying? Well, the city councilors are looking for sustainability. Well, $155,000, a one-time manna from heaven that we usually never get, can't be put to sustainability projects, can it? But what can it be put to? Now, I look at the place-based education thing as seed money. You got to convince them of it. It's what made you and me get to where we are today because somebody cared. And little seed money, you fertilize it a little, it gets to grow. But more importantly, you as school committee members need to go to them with the superintendent's backing and say, what do we need that's a one-time deal? Well, I can think of a few things. You need some new computers? There you go. You want to redesign the school library media center? Well, there you go. That's not going to subsidize a foreign language education program at the middle school because it's not a sustainable thing. But you got to go after that money. And you got to go after that money by, just like you asked me and Zeb to show you the facts about educating people because we don't teach the kids. You got to go out and look at what can you buy for $40,000 to $50,000 that's a one-time deal that's going to really make a difference to the kids that go to school in Newburyport. And that's your task. And that's what I'd like to see you do.
With the Race to the Top funds, we've sort of been practicing that because those were one-time monies that got dropped into the hamper. So yeah, you're right.
And when they ask you what's it going to cost, tell them, do your homework. That being said, you don't want to do it? Give me a call and tell me what you're looking for and I'll do it for you, okay? Because I've done it before, all right? But that's what you got to do.
You know, can I just, I like something that you said earlier about teaching is evolved, and it's one of the things that Alan November showed us at this conference, and Sean knows about this. You know, it's a new term they have now. It's called FLIP, which is the teacher models for kids at school, and then kids go home and do their homework, and usually they do it in isolation. Okay, and they try to do is flip that with the kind of resources that are online now. Actually, Dr. Roy, you talked about the Khan Academy, but in fact, Alan November was showing us the Khan Academy. He showed us some others, right? But what the kids were doing at home, looking at tapes, and then they would go into school with their teachers, and the teachers would then help them with the kind of things that normally they would be doing on their own at home. So it's kind of flipping what they learned at home versus what they learned in school. Teacher becomes more of a facilitator. This researcher from, I think it was MIT, Tufts. I think it was MIT. And he did this with his
I think
students.
it was Tufts.
I like Tufts.
Probably BC.
Anyhow, it was Bridgewater State.
Yeah.
Bridgie.
And so what the homework was, the kids had to come in with questions. And in this particular course that he was teaching, over a couple of years, he developed 3,000 questions. And so every class, he knows what the questions are. But it's because this is what he's teaching based upon what he thinks kids need to know, because he has this bank of questions. We don't do that. Kids come in when we teach. And so therefore, it's a whole different mindset about working with kids and having them be responsible for taking some charge of their learning by asking the questions as homework for the teacher.
That's also critical thinking. Well, that's one of the 4 basic skills.
Well, again, that's the kind of thing that needs to be dialogued here. Very critically over the next year or so to make some changes. I don't think it's all that hard to do what you just said. But if we continually say, we can't do it, we can't extend the school day, we can't extend the school year, I turn around and say, yes, we can.
Let me just add to what you said about extending the school day. And it's going to come up in budget, I think. Without going into too much detail, there was a request for services during the day. I said, why not extend it, why not have the service after school? I said, we have an after-school program 3 days a week, it's 3 hours a week, times 30 a week, it's 90 hours. Right? If this kid shows up 3 days a week, 90 hours of extra help in mathematics, that's an additional half year. Right? If it's an hour a day, 180 days, 180 hours, an additional 90 hours by going after school. That's, if you think about it, that's powerful. Not every kid has to be after school for 90 hours. Some kids do.
Well, I would like to say on the lengthening school day, the 5 kids who I started with 8 years ago, they're now seniors, and one of them's an 11th grader. One at Exeter, one at St. John's Prep, a couple in 3 in Triton. Those kids bored out of their gourds in school, in math class. They were the kids who took calculus as 6th graders, and they understood what a derivative was, or what the sum, the area under a curve, a polynomial. So I'm worried that the density of material for able kids is so light, it's water. And to say, you stay on for another 2 hours and be bored out of your gourd for 2 more hours, I see that as like prison. I just don't see, I mean, it's one thing to go play football or soccer or something, but there are a lot of kids who can use what you're talking about. I'm not arguing against that. But requiring 2 more hours of some of these kids, they get it instantaneously and they want to move on, and we got to move them on.
But that's the opportunity to have, sections or work in which they can work at their level.
Right, exactly. I mean, the point that I wanted to make is if you consider that to be remedial work, then you're really limiting what is possible during those after-school hours.
I'm just responding to what I see in schools now.
But I don't see that as necessarily, that extra work or remedial work. For some kids who thrive on those challenges, it's an opportunity to give those kids that extra challenge, that additional stuff that they're ready for.
All I was doing was 1 hour a week with these kids, and it's incredible what they can do.
Just examples. I would like to see discussions of how we can educate kids differently than we do right now. Whether that's not the correct way, whatever it is, there's got to be another way.
And my response is that I don't think that's a conversation the school committee should have in isolation.
I'd like to call to order. First of all, I sent our vice chair home, who was quite ill and needed to go home. So Cheryl, feel better soon, and we'll see you at the next meeting. All right, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Newburyport Public Schools School Committee for Monday, February 6, 2012. Mrs. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Menon?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Ms. Sweeney is absent. Ms. Holiday, Mayor Holiday?
Present.
Mr. DeCanta?
Here.
Ms. McCarthy?
Here.
Mr. Key?
Here.
Thank you. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The mission statement of the public schools. The Newburyport Public Schools are committed to the intellectual, physical, social development, and engagement of every student. Within a culture of high expectations for individual and group learning, our students experience rigorous academic challenge, are intellectually curious, and express themselves creatively. Our students enhance their well-being by applying knowledge and skills about nutrition, fitness, and healthy behaviors. Our schools are an inclusive and supportive community. As part of this community, our students demonstrate values of personal integrity, sensitivity, and social responsibility. Our schools partner with parents and community in significant ways to help achieve this mission. Members of our school community, teachers, parents, staff, and administration support this mission every day, in every classroom, on every field of play, and in every activity. And now comes our first period of public comment. We would appreciate it if you are going to make a public comment. We would like you to be on camera, so we'd appreciate if you'd come up and take one of the seats on either end of the table, state your name, address, and then, whatever your comment would be. Do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment this evening? Hearing none, we shall move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Keon, do we have warrants this evening?
Yes, we do. I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate of $24,115.48 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Warrant passes unanimously.
I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate to $253,569.28 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Second? Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Our next item on the consent agenda are the minutes of our meeting of January 26, 2012. Do I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Menon. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Keon. Discussion?
Just a few typos. Page 1, the address for Dr. Orlando should be William Hall Drive. I know.
I should know that one.
It's not terrace, it's drive.
Yes.
Okay. And on page, I think it's page 5, on the finance subcommittee, there's just a repeat of a couple words at the bottom. At a minimum is repeated twice. The finance subcommittee report. And then I wasn't sure, well, I thought the vote for the tuition rate wasn't unanimous, but maybe I'm wrong.
It wasn't.
It wasn't, okay.
I was against.
One against.
You.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Any other changes, edits, modifications to the minutes? All those in favor of the changes in the minutes?
Aye.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is our student report, but Alex has sent an email saying he had a conflict this evening and will not be joining us, so we look forward to his update on our next school committee meeting. Next agenda item is for an update on the wireless technology at the high school.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. How many times have you heard this question? We need wireless. we need robust wireless at the high school. Well, thanks to the Newburyport Educational Foundation, we have robust wireless at the high school. So you see the memo that I prepared for the NEF. And so I included in your package, so let me just highlight briefly. As of Friday, January 13th, the network was turned on at the high school. It is password protected as of right now, and teachers have had access to it. And but not all teachers. People have tried things out with the help of Steve Smith and Don Skane. And so as of February 15th, I believe all the teachers will be will be rolled out to teachers. The other thing that the staff is working on, specifically the department chairs, department heads, is the policy guidelines on the use of the wireless. So I believe the administrator decided to take a look at the Burlington High School acceptable use policy guidelines. They've been tweaking it for Newburyport High School. Going through the editing stage. That's as of last Wednesday. I'm not quite sure they finished it as of today. I would have heard that. I think I would have heard that. I didn't get all my emails. You didn't hear anything, did you? Okay. So therefore, I would say it must be close to being at the final stage, because it's going to be rolled out February 15th at a faculty meeting, and then soon after it will be rolled out to the students. One of the things that is going to be a little bit challenging, I think, for everyone here at the high school, and that has to do with trust. Not that we're not trustworthy, but when you ask students and teachers to use or to apply the acceptable use policy guidelines to the wireless program here at the high school, that means everyone. So therefore, the expectation would be that students would use the wireless program and use the network for their classroom and no other reason. Okay, so I think the expectations will have to be known, and I think there's going to be obviously a trial and error period. In terms of equipment, I would say the philosophy of the high school is to be homegrown. In other words, bring your device into school. And so they call it, they mean the administrators at the high school call it from home technology. So the devices will be brought from home, which is sort of eases the burden on the financial budget here. Now, obviously, we're going to have to do something for students who don't have access. I believe the NEF is willing and waiting for a proposal from the high school to be able to, to fund devices that will probably be stored in the library. So in terms of the library, right now the library has great access. There's an ad hoc technology. There's a library ad hoc committee working on, on making changes at the high school, in the high school library. I had a chance to talk to Lynn Cody, the new librarian, and I think some of the changes here are exciting. Yeah, very exciting. You won't recognize them. And possibly someone from the audience during public comment willing to share a little bit, because one person out there was on that committee. Let's see, last thing I could like to say would be at the NEF meeting with a couple of students on that that are now part of the NEF, high school students, and they had some pretty good questions, for me regarding policy. And I think students are waiting, and I like to think that everything's going to be turned on and ready to go after February vacation. So that's it.
Will members of the school committee be able to access that?
Yes.
Question that you'll be hearing a lot of is, what is the password? So we can get on that.
I believe it won't be password protected
At that point.
at that point.
You mentioned discussing, you mentioned Burlington High School and gleaning some information from them as to their process. I'm thinking back to the conference we went to, the technology conference, and Beverly's kind of ahead of the curve on this as well, with they've got a pretty robust program they put in their high school. And as far as the devices go, are we talking laptops, phones as well?
I would say, right now, you bring your device from home, I'm sure it's not limited. I believe a survey is going out to parents asking those kinds of questions. The only thing I can say about Burlington went with all of the same device. Whether it was rent over a 3-year period, or you buy it outright. There's two things they did. One, everyone bought, or everyone purchased, or released the same laptop, or whatever, whether it was Apple, I don't remember. They had a monitoring department, so that if students violated the acceptable use policy and guidelines, the laptop police went right to the room. We won't have that capability here. We just won't. So,
Because of the personnel or because of the equipment we have?
both. We don't have the personnel. And secondly, you bring your own device. I don't know enough about the platforms to speak to that. But I would say software is probably expensive, to manage it. And secondly, you need the personnel to manage it.
Any other questions for Dr. Koval? Thank you for the update. Our next agenda item is, there's a change from the original agenda, is to approve the appointment of Mr. F. Nelson Burns. He was unanimously voted by the school committee on July 13, 2009. He is one of 2 representatives, and he replaced a long-term serving member, Mr. James Goodwin. So that vote is before us this evening.
I move the appointment of F. Nelson Burns to a 3-year term as the school committee representative from Newburyport to the Whittier Regional Vocational School.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to get, Mr. Burns came in once last year. I was wondering if maybe we could get him on maybe more than once a year, number one. And,
Bring both of them.
excuse me?
Bring both of them.
Right, oh yeah, right. And I also was wondering if there's any chance we could get some type of an update on our current students that have applied and/or been accepted to Whittier.
My process is in process right now, in terms of...
Right now, students who are interested submit their application to Mr. Hoppin, principal. And when I spoke to Superintendent DeRosa last week, he said that once he gets the applications into the school and he knows about it, he will call me with the final numbers and let me know how many students, have applied. Last that I know of, I want to say 6 students, but that was as of 3 weeks ago. 6 students submitted applications. 20 were initially interested. So then I know.
So there's definitely, I think, an improvement in terms of that outreach that we had talked about several years ago.
Right.
In terms of just trying to, get the information out to families about, Whittier as an option, so.
I think we can do much better though. I really do. I think we've got a long way to go to really, 8th grade is a tough time for somebody to be thinking, for an at that age, it's difficult to think ahead like that. We need to really.
What if we had them come in for public conversation, the 2 school committee members from Whittier, so that we could have, conversation about, what's going on, and that would also, give us a little advance prep, because we haven't seen our budget assessment from Whittier yet. I heard that it's going up slightly, but last year it went down, so.
And would you like me to invite either the principal, the assistant principal, the middle school?
Yes.
For a public conversation?
And also,
That'd be great.
I think Superintendent DeRosa should be invited too, so we could have sort of that team here to have a conversation about what's happening with the marketing of the program, and then overall get an update on what's happening in the school.
I think that would be really useful. I would encourage, though, as when we communicate this, that they understand that public conversation is an informal conversation.
I would just like to add some clarity to the discussion, though, which is, I don't believe that our Whittier representatives necessarily hold the keys to our success of improving our representation at Whittier. I think that really falls on us as a committee. And one other thing that strikes me, do we know if Whittier connects with the IC? Because even though the IC is a private school, many, I don't know what the average is, but many 8th graders from the IC do end up coming into the high school.
It's a question we can ask them.
Honorable Mayor Holiday, if I can we just dispense with Mr. Burns' vote rather than discuss these dynamics as the agenda item is specifically for his election.
Forgive me for seizing the opportunity.
It's okay, it's okay. So the motion on the floor is to approve Mr. F. Nelson Burns' 3-year appointment as school committee representing Newburyport to Whittier. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously, thank you. Our next committee agenda item is the MSBA update.
Great. The few items for MSBA. The building committee met last week and unanimously voted the submittal that was due to MSBA on February 2nd. That submittal had various documents to it, binder probably twice the size, as well as schematic designs that arrived last week. It was a unanimous vote. The building committee also voted the educational program summary as well as the delivery of special education summary that was required and part of the submittal. So MSBA for the next few weeks are going to go through the submittal to ensure that A, it contains everything that it's supposed to contain, and B, they're actually going to review the drawings and or the schematic designs to ensure that from a model school perspective, it represents what the program envisioned it should. They are also going to spend the next few weeks in working with HERE as well as HMFH in regards to cost estimating this building project. The date of the board meeting that the project scope and budget is going to be presented is March 28th, and they need this amount of lead time to do all that work, to verify that the submittal contains what they're supposed to contain, and then work with both Tony and Laura in regards to the cost estimating. So that's ongoing as we speak in regards to the Bresnahan Model School Program. Behind you, you can see the building project plans, a site plan, the first floor plan, the third floor, and then the second floor, so excuse us for that. The plans are for the site. It's fairly in draft form at this particular point as we're getting a handle around where utilities are coming in, gas, sewer, water, electrical as well. Working closely with the senior center to understand what movement needs to occur there and other parties that are appropriate. The architects did a phenomenal job in getting the schematic designs done. We got them in on Friday, and Steve and I were like two little kids going through them in the conference room. So that was very, very a yeoman's job to get that done because, as you know, this building was built for 15 East Fairhaven. It's going to over 700. It's adding a floor, and many of the structural drawings, HVAC, all of those, electrical, all had to be redone, and they did an incredible job getting that by the due date of February 2nd to MSBA. In regards to Knockmolin,
I'll just interrupt 1 second. I just wanted to point out one thing here, is that because there's been a little bit of change, because the school building committee had some concerns about how much green space there was for play areas. In fact, Dan brought this up at one of our meetings. So this basketball court has been moved over here, closer, so that this creates more of a green space. And actually, all of the senior parking has been shifted up. This is gone, this roundabout, because we don't need that anymore, and parking swings over here. Because as you move into the drop-off here, you don't need this circular area, because the main entrance to the senior center is, these consultants said you never have a north-facing entrance for seniors. So they moved the senior center entrance here. So this is why you don't need this space here, and creates a way to shift more parking over and creates more green space here. So and I think that was an important piece that the school building committee was really concerned about.
In regards to the Knock-Nolan renovations and additions project, the school building committee approved the architect's contract the other evening. The architect has been on site as reported to you. They've come in on the half Thursdays. They've come in, done the site surveying in the exterior portion of the building, and they've come in the past couple weekends. In 2 weeks, we're going to actually be drilling borings in the school where the stepping has occurred in the front office area, as well as the gymnasium, so that we can start to identify exactly what's happening there. So we've had structural engineers, electrical engineers, we've had various other kinds of forensic people in the buildings, on the roofs. So they've hit the ground running from the minute they were approved at MSBA's board meeting, and we're moving forward from that perspective. So there's a lot of activity on both projects now. They're in fairly full gear at this particular point in time, and it's keeping Steve and I very busy, but it's all good work. It's all good work.
Thank you, Deidre. Any questions for Deidre on the school building projects? Thank you. The budget update is our next item. Is that?
Recognize Assistant Superintendent David Bell.
I have for you a updated spreadsheet based on some schedule conflict and some other odds and ends in regards to trying to get everybody scheduled. So this is updated. I handed this one out to you at the last meeting at the Knock Library, so this is updated. You should throw the other away. Again, on the left-hand side, that first column, we've got the 6. We're going to bring in the elementary schools all together at your next school committee meeting on the 28th. The following meeting will be the high school and the middle school, and this will be for the purposes of updating you on the second year of the 2-year plan that was approved 2 years ago. The next column is a column that we're working internally, reviewing budgets at the central office level with Angela, myself, Karen, and Mark, bringing in clusters or groups of people as best we can. I'm still trying to fit Nolan in somewhere. Pauline's schedule is conflicting with all of it, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And then the last column has not changed. These are the budget presentations at the site with the tour that has been requested, and each school is slotted for those dates. So those are firm and have not changed since the last time I presented this to you. The budget process, the principals have been working with either their department heads or their BLTs, building leadership teams, and or other school leaders developing their budgets, as well as school councils. All that work in all our budget forms, which are called G2s, are due to me by Friday. So we will be able to then take all of that and really start to enter into our budget module, all the budget conversations and updates, and be able to really start to really see what we're looking at as far as FY13 is concerned.
Yes, Andrew?
May I ask what is the budget assumptions that the principals are working under? Are they working for maintaining the same level of services? Are they looking for whatever they feel they need? What were their concerns?
Certainly they're looking at establishing the same level of services, but the conversations are, but what do you need? But what do you need? Not what you would like, but what do you need? How are we going to make sure that we're providing the appropriate educational program for kids? Having said that, I know that I've got a list over here that they're working with as well, as far as some of the value-added things that we talked about last year. But the instructions, at least at this stage, are level services, what's needed within that. You'll see some FTEs come out of those conversations, such as the high school, for example. There have been conversations with Michael about adding .2s in certain key areas to achieve some of the things that he wants to have happen on behalf of the high school, discussions with school council, discussion with leadership, etc. You're welcome.
Any other comments, discussion?
Is the central office budget going to be presented to us? Have you figured out what date that's going to be presented to us?
We typically do that, it's left off at the, on the 4th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if we were going to see it later.
Or if we're at the middle school, you'd rather have it on the middle school, since we're there, we could do it that night too.
Whatever makes the most.
Okay.
Will we, yeah, actually, I do have a question. Will we will have access to these budget proposals before the budget hearings?
On these Wednesday dates?
Yeah.
Yes.
Any idea when you will be far enough along that you're willing to get that stuff circulated?
Even by school.
Just by school.
By school as opposed to a whole book.
Right, right. I would say that if the first meeting is the Brown School, March 7th, knowing that we're looking at due date on the 10th, sorry, just let me take a peek at calendars here. Knowing we've got to enter all that calculated salaries. I think, don't hold me to it, by the Friday, the 2nd and or Thursday the 1st. At the school committee meeting on the 28th, I hope to have a figure, if you will, that first page of the budget book that at least by sight tells you where we are. But on the 3rd of March, it's a Saturday, we're meeting with all the principals and administrators to show them what we've compiled as well. So I want to be respectful to process as far as making sure that they can verify exactly what's resulted in what they've submitted.
Yeah, I think if we can just cycle it so that, we're getting as much, getting these site-based budgets as much in advance as possible, then we'll be able to come in with our questions, and that will just be really useful.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Deirdre. And we now leads us to the new educator evaluation for the superintendent, Dr. Kerbel.
Thank you. Well, Bruce held up this binder during public conversation, and this is the new educator evaluation system. And you received this. I just gave you the model contract that's going to have to be negotiated with the teachers union. But during this period, we're just going to talk about the new evaluation system for the superintendent. Now, it's a little bit premature by looking at the drafts in the, I believe, maybe it was over the summer, came in here and talked a little bit about goals, had a lot of goals, and then I referred you to the rubric that was set aside for administrators and principals. That has been completely updated, and it's, I would say completely revised, but it has been updated. What it has not been updated, and it was quite accurate from before, was a process for for working with me in terms of evaluating me a year from now, whatever time you determine. So you have an implementation guide for the superintendent, and you were asked to read those pages, at least key in on certain steps within a 5-step cycle. So what I'm asking Bruce to do is, Bruce to take the school committee through this activity now, but I just want to mention a couple of things. We have a new teacher evaluation committee made up of teachers, administrators, and school committee members. We have gone to a getting started workshop. Those that didn't go spend time with Pat Levitt, Angela, and me, and we did is we went through, tried to get everybody caught up as we unpacked this model system. Now we have a subcommittee. No, I'm sorry, let me just back up. Recently, we had our full committee together, it was about 16 of us, as we unpacked the model system for educator evaluation, and every person had a role. Bruce had a role with Deirdre in terms of looking at the superintendent's evaluation, or at least the process for the superintendent's evaluation. This 15 minutes, and that's what we set aside in the agenda, this is 15 minutes, is to briefly unpack the implementation guide for the superintendent. This is not a down and dirty, let's take a look at everything. So let's not get caught up in a 45-minute conversation about this. There's a subcommittee of the school committee, and let's see if I remember this. Cheryl, Bruce, Nick, and Donna serve on that committee. They should spend the bulk of the time really unpacking and looking at all aspects of the system, as working with me to get ready for probably July 2012. Meanwhile, my goals and the way you would evaluate me is a pilot based upon this new system. Bruce, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Before I just sort of go through the overview and then ask people who read sections if they want to share what their understanding was of it, I want to make some points that I made that I found to be very interesting. These sort of came out of a conversation that Deirdre and I had last Friday at the training. The system looks roughly the same at each stop along the way of our staff. The staff are evaluated, teachers are evaluated in the same way that principals are evaluated, that administrators are evaluated, that the superintendent's evaluated. But there are some interesting points, I think, to make about who's evaluating the superintendent. And that is, we are evaluating the superintendent. And we are the most part-time people you can have in the school system. We're an elected body. We are not necessarily educators by training. And we are a policy-making body. And that raised some questions for Deirdre and I. I circulated some of those questions for you, and I think it'll surface other interesting questions. We will get some clarification, I think, on some of those questions from the state, but I also think it's like that old cartoon, with the math problem here and the answer here, and in the middle it says this is where the magic happens. I think that to some extent, we are going to have to figure out how to make some of the system work. I think that's going to end up being our task. I'm not sure where or when we're going to know that, but I think it will be soon that we're going to have to begin to challenge it, especially if we want to try to get something done by the summer. To kind of walk through it very quickly, you will notice that there are 4 standards in the rubric that the superintendent is evaluated on. Deirdre, of course, counted up the number of elements contained in those standards. The first standard, which is instructional leadership, has 14 different elements as part of the rubric. The second standard, which is management and operation, has 10 elements. The third, which is family and community engagement, has 7. And professional culture, which is the 4th standard, has 11 elements. So there are a total of 35 elements. No superintendent can be considered to be proficient if they do not score proficient in that first standard. So they have to be scored proficient, which raised the question for Deirdre and I, as it raised for the teachers, how do you rate somebody as proficient? If there are 14 elements, do they need to be rated proficient in all 14 elements? Do they need to be rated proficient in 8 of 14? Do they need no unsatisfactory rankings as part of the overall ranking? And there isn't an answer for that. There isn't one for the teachers, there isn't one for the principals, and there isn't one for the superintendent. And that is an area in which we need to get some clarification. So that's sort of, the cycle really does begin with the superintendent doing a self-assessment. And the superintendent, in doing the self-assessment, has to come up with at least a professional practice and at least a student learning goal, and at least 2 to 3 district goals. So the bare minimum that they're expecting from a superintendent in terms of coming forward from their self-assessment are 5 or 6 goals. Once the superintendent has done their self-assessment, they share that with us, and we as a school committee, and this is where this differs obviously from everybody else who's being evaluated in the system. And it's worth saying it again. The goals, the procedures, the benchmarks are decided by the school committee in public session. So we have to have that conversation. Mark presents his self-evaluation, and we then work collectively on television, in public, in open session, to create what that list of goals are going to be, ideally. And the other major difference, obviously, and we're not sure what the logistics of all of this are, at the end of the process, we do, each individually, we do the summative assessment. So we have 2 of the rubrics, we do our own assessment, we bring it in here, and we discuss that assessment in public session. So it's not, Mark doesn't see that before we talk about it, which raised some questions about, to what degree is it possible to circulate things without comments? How do we do that under open meeting, if we can do that at all? So we begin to formulate questions, and I think if tonight we come up with additional questions, I think that's going to be really, really helpful. And if there are questions that I can try to answer.
So, Bruce, as part of the background information in your packet, part of the agenda, it says each member will be asked to speak about a step in the 5-step evaluation cycle. Just a way to unpack, you gave an overview, so just a way to unpack this. And then, I like what you said, if there are questions, let's just gather the questions so that the subcommittee can grapple with it Wednesday when we meet. Okay, so it was, I believe, Nick at step 1, Dan at step 2, Bruce step 3, Steve step 4, Cheryl and, well, Audrey step 5. And then, do you want a few minutes to go over, look at it, or are you ready?
Okay, step 1.
So step 1 is the superintendent self-evaluation. And I think the interesting thing about this step is that it is both the first step of a new cycle and the last step of the old cycle. It really is when the superintendent comes back, takes a look at what has happened as a result of that last cycle and says, okay, what does that mean to me now and where do I take it from here? And that's what truly ties this into a cycle and makes it going forward. As Bruce described, this is a process of taking a look at the results that they've had in the different areas up to this point, and it will become richer with each successive cycle that we go through. And also takes a look at and consults with the school committee and what's going on in the schools to come up with other things that he needs to take a look at. Based upon that, the superintendent will then come up with a very defined number of goals that we're looking for. One goal related to improving student learning. One related to the superintendent's own professional development and improvement in his ability to do his professional practice. And then 2 to 4 other district improvement goals that are focused on some of the areas. Now, when we take a look at the 4 areas of standards that Bruce also mentioned, you know, the instructional leadership, the operational management, family and community, etc., that begins to widen the picture an awful lot. So I think the challenge for the superintendent there is going to be able to come up with things that are specific enough that can be what they call SMART goals, that can be that are specific, that can be measured, and that can then be assessed as we go forward. We know what it is that we mean when the superintendent says, I'm going to set this as a goal. We will have a very clear picture of what that looks like when it's finished. So it's a very interesting process of starting the evaluation cycle, and I would just like to stress that it is, in my way of thinking, also the last step of the cycle. It's where it all ties together again. So I'm just going to leave it there, otherwise I'm going to be stepping on Dan's toes, or steps 3, 4, 5.
Dan, step 2?
Step 2, analysis, goal setting, and plan development. My interpretation of this is really collaboration between Mark and the committee. Mark is going to present us his analysis of his performance to the standards and his goals. We again will hopefully come, I'm sure we will, come to a mutual agreement on what those goals should be, set them, and develop a plan to see them through. And again, I would just like to echo, I think, where Nick was going, which is it seems like a plan that has potential to work really well for the district and for all involved.
Thank you, Dan. Bruce, step 3?
Step 3 was something that actually Deirdre and I had spent a lot of time on talking about on Friday, and I think this is the part where the magic happens. The superintendent has to implement the plan, and part of implementing the plan is we will have defined with the superintendent what data we're going to collect. And when I looked first at the guide, item number 2 says the superintendent and the school committee members individually collect evidence, which I thought was very interesting. And then when you sort of break it out, it's the superintendent that collects all of the information and the school committee reviews it. And they gave examples of the kinds of information that we might collect to look at to determine whether or not the superintendent is meeting their goals. And as I began to read down through it, it raised the question for me about how dynamic the process was. Is our evaluation of the superintendent going to be primarily looking at documents, or is it going to be a more engaged and intentional evaluation? For example, they talk about mid-cycle and end-of-cycle reports on progress, school committee agendas, materials, and minutes. Observations of the superintendent in action at school committee meetings, in forums with faculty, and in community events. And the question that Deirdre and I had coming out of that is, was the training that we went to on Friday an example of a forum, or if professional development, the support he's providing for his principals, will we be meeting with him and his principals as part of the observation? And I don't know the answer to that question. But that, are we going to be able to determine how effective Mark is in supporting the principals by looking at the agendas of those meetings? I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. So that has raised some questions about how we're actually going to be able to do that. Not so much from the point of view of looking over the shoulder, but making sure that we're seeing what Mark is doing. That we get a sense of, as things are changing, as he's meeting these goals, that we can recognize that in a very real way. And we're going to be looking, and again, this also moves a little bit into that second area, which will take 2 or 3 years to really come up to speed, and that is the student growth measure that is part of this evaluation process at each level. So over time, over the next several years, as we're beginning to gather student growth data from MCAS, from other standardized tests we may be doing, and importantly, from the assessments that we are developing ourselves, our own assessments, to measure student growth. Over time, that's going to become another grouping of items that we're going to need to be looking at as part of the evaluation process.
Thank you, Bruce. Steve, step 4?
Sure. Step 4, mid-cycle goals review meeting. I look at that as a midpoint review, if you will, and it serves both practical and vital functions in the success of a plan. Practical from the standpoint that, for example, if you were to ask someone to do a task, to do a job, you gave them 4 weeks to do it, and you didn't wait till you waited till the 26th day to check how they're doing, and all of a sudden you find out on day 26 everything's not in order. You both fail at making the progress that you want to make. So step 4 allows for what I would refer to a midpoint follow-up. And it's vital because I think we all want the plans to work and have a life, show action, be reflective of what we're trying to do ultimately for the education of kids in Newburyport. Also, a midpoint goals review allows for proper ownership and empowerment of an issue because it allows for communication between the superintendent and a school committee to understand and make any midpoint adjustments as to, any, I guess it's called mid-course adjustments may be needed in order to achieve the goals. So I believe and it's all, the other thing it does, it also prompts a timely execution or implementation of the plan, because if you don't give it enough time to work, if you don't widen that space out where you're going to do midpoint follow-up, by widening it out, you essentially force the plan to happen sooner as opposed to later, because you ultimately want to get the results. So it allows for sharing of feedback, it allows for a clear understanding of progress on each goal, and it allows for mid-course adjustments. And again, I just see it as being a practical and vital element in this cycle for success of a plan.
Thank you, Steve. Audrey, step 5?
Step 5 is end of the cycle summative evaluation reports. And how I interpret this is really basically where the rubber hits the road. I think that it is an end of the cycle reporting, obviously, but that it is an opportunity to look, see, and understand the attainment of the goals that were set, and a measurement of the progress towards the goals that may be long-term achievement. And unlike step 4, it is a summary of the whole cycle. And I think the advantage of this, in addition to what it says here about the superintendent's evaluation and our evaluation, is that it provides the opportunity to know and be assured and just double check that we continue to move forward in all of our goals. And, so it's like a report card.
Thank you, Audrey. Any other comments about the evaluation process?
I do want to say that Deirdre and Angela kind of caught in this little quagmire because my role would be to evaluate them, and they have some the attributes of the principal and some attributes of the superintendent. So I'll be looking at the rubrics for both and trying to match up the standards that meets, or that really matches up with your position. So I just want to let you know that. So it's really interesting. Everyone, it's so funny how everyone contributes to the successful evaluation of the superintendent. It's important, and I think it was Bruce and said early on, the classroom teachers really don't care about the superintendent, but I really have to care about the teachers because they're concerned about their own evaluation, and I think we all want them to do well anyway. So now this relationship becomes symbiotic because it really isn't about I got you, it's about growth and development. If I'm looking, I see Sean, he's in the audience. It's about Sean and teachers like Sean, and we work towards the growth and development of all of our teachers. Same with our principals, same with central office, and absolutely the superintendent. Okay, so I think we'll talk more about this at the sub-meeting that we have on Wednesday.
I just have one question. We have established your goals for this year. You have accepted them. Are we supposed to do a mid-cycle evaluation?
No, I think the purpose of it was just to look at it and learn what we agreed upon, because it was fairly comprehensive. But
Very
I
comprehensive.
defer to you.
Yeah, I think that our hope was to sort of, we had this really interesting opportunity to take it out for a test drive, the system and the way that it's being laid out now. We're not obligated to do that, not until the next cycle of evaluation begins. But we may decide that we want to take a look
Well,
at
even
this.
informally, just to sort of get us to have a conversation to determine, are we both agreeing? Because we sort of gave them to you, you sort of gave us feedback and said these are okay, but, what are you working on in this goal? That sounds great. That's exactly what we had in mind as we put these goals and objectives together. So I think that it would make sense to at least have an informal conversation about where we're going so that there's no surprises when June hits and it's like, what do you mean you were working on that?
So,
Does that make sense? Anything else on evaluations, Nick?
Yeah, I just have a concern which I think I'd like to raise for all of us to be thinking about and perhaps spend some time on as we move forward in this process. And that really does tie into the step which I have to cover, which is step one. And that is, how do we make sure that these steps and these cycles tie in effectively to our long-term vision as stated right now in our strategic plan? And hopefully as that strategic plan becomes updated to continue to make sure that we're heading in that direction and it's not just a series of one-offs that are evaluated. So I'd like to think about how we tie this whole process, which we all agree is wonderful and it's very well thought, or it's very well thought out, to that long-term planning piece of it.
Bruce, did you have another comment?
No, I think that's
Thank
fine.
you.
It is a very substantial process, and it's, I think, going to yield some really important information and direction for what we're doing.
Thank you. It's time for our second public comment. Anyone who would like to make a public comment, I would ask that you please come up in front of the camera and sit in a chair and state your name and address and make your comment. Dr. Orlando.
Bible for you to swear.
Ralph Orlando, 4 William Hall Drive, Newark, New Jersey, Newburyport. I want to take a little opportunity to go over this wireless technology, which I think is a boom, and I want to keep school committee members attuned to it. The generosity of, I believe the NEF is who Dr. Kerbel indicated was the resource funding this was a significant outlay of money, and to put it here and to just have it said that we have it here and do nothing with it is not really a lot of bang for their buck. To be quite honest with you, anybody would just come in here and just turn on their computer and sort of get on the internet. That's not what it's all about. So that in mind, I think you on school committee need to sort of look for ways to get this utilized toward the education of the youth. One of the things that was part of this proposition when it first came about was the excess money to put it in the high school was to get it in the middle school. You need to keep on that to make sure it gets to the middle school. Then what we do with it becomes very critical because, for example, it's really a money saver in the long run in that, let's say now you have access to 150 e-readers. Or the school owns, say, 40 e-readers. Well, all the classic novels become free. Teachers can design their own textbooks. You don't even have to buy a textbook. The kid that needs the repetition that Mr. Warren talked about either a little earlier today about practice over and over. So if I can't get chemical valences the first time in class and I come to the after class thing that the teacher runs, and after 2 I still don't get it, if I want to do it 550 times and I get it under the 551st time, it's on my little laptop or my little iPad or what have you. So where am I going with this? We have to continually put not necessarily sustainable funds into this, but as I talked to you at the public conversation period, $50,000 for the wireless, $20,000 buys you 40 iPads. You put 40 iPads, you got 2 classrooms, kids that can take some sort of interactive format in a library or a large media center, which is where the configuration is going for the library here at the high school. We need to assess what the needs are for the middle school students in terms of iPads and devices and what have you, because to have the wireless here just to say we have it here is not really worth anything to me. I think you need to figure out novel ways on how to get it utilized in the classrooms, looking at what some of the other schools have been doing this for a year have done, asking for all your teachers to put proposals together that look at how we can save money, how we can get novels, textbooks, classes on these things, and so the kid, when he packs up his little laptop or iPad, goes home and has access to it 24/7. So that's what I want you folks to do, is to keep up on this, to make sure you know all there is to know about it, and to make sure it's being utilized more than just saying we have a wireless at the high school. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment at this time? Thank you very much. We'll move on to subcommittee reports. The first is the communications subcommittee that I believe met on February 3rd.
We met last Friday. We went over the goals that we had aligned for ourselves at the meetings that we had here when the committees were actually set up, which were basically 3 large goals, one around websites, one around community outreach, PR, making sure that everybody knows all the good things that are going on in our schools, and the final one about conversation and or dialogue with the community in such a way that makes sense and that we can truly facilitate and enable better conversation with the public at large. As a way of getting started, each one of those 3 projects has been assigned a member of the committee to try to put some scope around it and define exactly what the work in that goal entails. Audrey will be working on websites, I'll be working on the outreach and PR piece, and Bruce will be working on dialogue with the community piece, which includes email usage. So that was a productive piece of time. Then we also spent some time reviewing the work that we are doing in collaboration with the school building committee and with the community group that has been set up to help facilitate the passing of the ballot initiative. which is the Port Pride group. I've been involved with both on a regular basis, and I think we've got some good feedback going. I'll be meeting with Deirdre in that context later this week to get the second of our 2 websites going that are school-based websites that are really focused on, excuse me, on the whole project, not only up to the election, but through the election and afterwards, what's happening with construction. We envision having webcams so people can come in and see how the construction is going on our websites and stuff like that. So we're moving ahead now with the second website, which will be focused on the Knock-Mullen project. The other thing I just wanted to show off is we do have a logo for the Port Pride Community Group, Community Building Group. If anybody would like to take a look at it, I have it. It is on our Facebook page. So people, it is available to people. And we're looking forward to get that process going. We begin to map out our calendar towards Election Day on June 5th.
Thank you.
Final item that we talked about was the effect of location on our communication with the public at large. And we discussed, all of us had heard negative comments about our meeting at the middle school library. We had difficulty hearing each other as well. And so the superintendent will be taking it upon himself to meet with PortMedia and take a look at what can be done in terms of locations, what some of our next steps might be.
Thank you. Are there other subcommittees to report out this evening?
Policy would like to meet this Friday, just need to schedule it possible for you. Nick and I are on Zoom. We'd like to try to meet this Friday.
What time?
Whatever works for everybody. I'm pretty open all day. So, do you want to meet earlier in the morning? What works best for you, Steve?
Anything around 8.
8?
8? It is. Policy will be meeting at 8 o'clock on Friday.
Okay, policy will be meeting at 8 o'clock on Friday. Any other subcommittee groups that have to report? Audrey? Joint Ed?
Well, Joint Ed met very briefly. We were edged out by the FinCom, I think. But we did meet briefly and talked about our procedures for coming up with the agenda and some of the issues that at least the Joint Ed City Council members would like to see discussed. And there's going to be more conversation with that when they go back to the City Council as a whole and discuss that. So our next meeting should be on March 5th at 5:30.
FinCom, do we have a report on that?
Our next meeting's February 17th.
All right then, thank you. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Carl?
On your holiday, I just wanted to start this today. It's a updated profile of the Newburyport High School, 2011-2012. The reason why I'm showing you this is that the college acceptance class of 2011 has been updated. I know I've been asked about that quite a bit. It's going to be put on the high school website, so that will be updated. Reading Across America is Friday, March 2nd. Grace Ann Remus is looking for volunteers to read in class. So I think you received an email. If you're interested in reading to a classroom, please contact Grace Ann. I just wanted to read the names of the 2012 Northeastern Junior District Festival accepted students. That's Andrew Allman, Alex Connor, Haley Hawks, and Morgan Pyle. Congratulations to those students. And I know that Mr. Stoller was very proud. He wrote a wonderful note to the students. And so congratulations to them. Are you interested in basketball and you like to watch third grade kids demonstrate their skills? Kathy Hill and the teams of tomorrow. Basketball skills demonstration team will perform March 31st at 2 p.m. at the TD Garden during the Harlem Globetrotters halftime. If you're interested in tickets, see Kathy. They are $40 a piece. They are also performing at halftime, February 7th and February 10th of the varsity boys game. So I'm going to see them tomorrow night myself. I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. I do want to just recognize 3 students who are doing community service projects. There are a lot more, but 3 that I've come in contact with. I'm so impressed with the compassion, passion, and the zeal for which these students are pursuing their projects. Lauren Sundstrom, she's been here. You've heard from her. I met with Maggie Bazina, a 5th grade student who is going to participate, who's going to run, he's going to organize a fundraiser to raise enough money to run a 2-week theater program for students in Lawrence. And that was very admirable. And Rachel Reitman, I met with her the other day, and she's would like to run Meatless Mondays. And so she's, Deidre met her, and she's interested in working with our food service and our students here and our principal. And so I think these are good stories, people doing a lot of things, and I really appreciate the activism of all of our students in our system. And that is it. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one other thing about Lauren, is her Clothes for Hope. There's a big box in the lobby of City Hall. If anybody didn't get a chance to drop off clothes in the schools when she was collecting, so it'll be there for another 2 weeks, and they're, so come by, it's right there, right, and easy to drop off, run in, drop your gently used or new clothing. So please contribute. This is a great cause. Thank you, Dr. Carbo. Okay, the Assistant Superintendent's report. Angela, would you like to go first?
Any comment about what happened here last Friday? Teacher evaluation?
Okay, sure. Sorry.
That's okay. Last Friday, we met the large committee around the new teacher evaluation system, and we broke into smaller groups, and we worked on different components of the teacher evaluation system, and we started to make connections between what we've learned about the evaluation system and what the bargaining language is and how they connect together. And we presented out to the various groups. Some people were focused on, say for example, in the teacher evaluation rubric, some people focused on the excellence and proficient category. Other people focused on the needs improvement and unsatisfactory category. Some people were focused on overarching themes, some are with the superintendent's contract. And then we all reported out, and we started to develop a nice bank of questions based on what we know so far, what we're learning, what we don't know at all yet. And so it was a productive day. We had really good conversations. It was nice to see that the teachers involved in the subcommittee, well, everyone involved in the subcommittee is becoming pretty familiar with the language within the system so that they can transfer it and apply it to the contract language. So it was a good day.
If I can just add one thing to that. One of the points that we made and will continue to make is that from the perspective of the state, they believe that they have made the proficient level very rigorous, and that is the target that they are asking everybody to look at. And exemplary teachers will, by their very nature, exceed that, and they will model other behavior. They will become the teachers who teach, but that they put a tremendous amount of energy into making the rubric around what is proficient to be very, very rigorous and very, very thoughtful, which I think bears repeating again and again. That proficient doesn't mean average. It doesn't mean mediocre. Proficient means, at the top of your game, very skilled at what you do.
To add to that, Bruce, that was a really important part of the day. People really started to pull the rubric apart and differentiate between the two.
And what Bruce just said is such an important part of being an exemplary teacher would be that you are capable and you do model for others. And you're really a leader in what others should be doing. It really takes it beyond that level of proficient where you're just an outstanding teacher, that you're taking it to the next level where you're a model for others.
Anything else, Angela?
That's all. Thank you.
I wanted just to update you that the United States Department of Agriculture has recently passed new rules and regulations as it relates to your food service program. And we're working closely with Chartwells and understanding the impact to that, as well as the time frame for implementation. It's a 2-year implementation, but we'll have to understand what standards that we're currently meeting under federal rules will we have to make adjustments for. There are such things as phased implementations and requirements. They're estimated to add $3.2 billion to school meal costs over the next 5 years because, as always, these are unfunded mandates, and yet this is going to cost the district and/or the lunch program a little more. They're going to talk a little bit about potential increases in reimbursement to the districts because of the increase of cost, and then looking at parity regarding school lunch prices.
Where is our food service contract up for?
The food service contract actually had to be sent out again last year based on changes that the U.S. government made in regards to commodities and how districts were being reimbursed based on those commodities. There were some feeling that some companies that were being reimbursed weren't sending that reimbursement to the districts. So that had to be rebid, everyone had to play on the same playing field. It's a 3-year award with 2 annual 1-years for the 4th and then the 5th. You're welcome. That's it, thank you.
Well, any other business before the school committee tonight? Go to the order?
Okay, executive session.
No executive session? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
All right, and I want to